Today is the 30th of March 2024, one day before Europe's clocks transition into summertime. 2 days ago, on the 28th of March, would have been the birthday of the great Czech writer Bohumil Hrabal. If Hrabal was alive today, then he would have been celebrating his 110th birthday this week. So, in a tribute to Hrabal's anniversary and to bid farewell to our own days of winter darkness, we have assembled a group of people together and decided to organize a trip outside of Prague. Bohumil Hrabal grew up in a little town called Nymburk, and it is to Nymburk which we are heading today. Hrabal also used to love going out to the pub, and so we are going to attempt our own pub crawl. Today the sun will set at 6:29 this evening, and our train is due to arrive just before 10 AM. This means we have about 10 hours of sunlight left to explore what this town has to offer. On the way into town is the local secondary school, which is nowadays named after Hrabal. At the time of its renaming, which was only 10 years ago, some people objected to the school taking his name because Hrabal was not actually a very good student here, and he even failed Czech, which might seem hard to imagine now. Legend has it that there is still a radiator somewhere in here which Hrabal peed upon in order to get kicked out of class. These are the city walls, one of Nymburk's most recognizable landmarks, looking out on the banks of the river Labe. Down here there is also a hut selling food and drinks, so this is going to be our stop for beer number one. While the others are enjoying their drinks, I'm taking a little walk around the old town. Right now I'm standing on a street called Malé Valley, which runs in a hemisphere around the centre. The critic Radko Pitlik writes about how Hrabal used to come here and sit on the steps with his friend Marisko, and the two of them would recite surrealist poetry to each other, also wearing green berets to indicate their artistic leanings. In Hrabal's earlier years, he was attracted to surrealism, and he even attempted some experimental poetry as a young man. However, ultimately, he was to become famous as a writer of prose fiction in a more realist style. Nonetheless, we can detect the legacy of surrealism in the style in which he constructed his prose. For example, in his extremely long sentences, his streams of subconsciousness which flow out like automatic surrealist writing. Initially, Hrabal went up to Prague to study law, but his studies were disrupted by the Second World War. In 1939, the Nazis closed all Czech universities, and so Hrabal returned to spend the wartime back home. In one of his letters, he tells an anecdote of how he was returning home after some drinks, and he was speaking some mocking German to his friends while they crossed this empty square. However, a Nazi then marched out of a building, the Hotel na Knieżecy, which used to be just here, and he grabbed Hrabal by the throat and started dragging him towards a car, presumably to be taken for interrogation. But at the last moment, a young woman ran from a side street and yelled at the Nazi that she would never see him again. And so the Nazi dropped Hrabal and ran after the woman, and he was saved from the clutches of the Gestapo. Back down at the river, the first round is almost finished, and so it's on to our second stop. So now we're at the pub Joffine, which is just up the river from the brewery where Hrabal's family lived. The Joffine is an important location for some of the scenes in the novel The Little Town Where Time Stood Still, because it is here where the character, Uncle Pepin, comes to drink with his lovely ladies at the end of his shifts. Pepin is a recurring character in many of Hrabal's novels, based off his real uncle, who was originally a shoemaker, but who came to stay at the brewery for a few weeks and ended up staying for the remainder of his life. Pepin is a tireless storyteller whom nobody can stop speaking and who never shuts up about his life in the Austrian army. Pepin's continuous flow of speech was another inspiration for Hrabal's own style of long, flowing sentences of prose. Now we're walking along the river towpath, and our third stop will be the Nymburk Brewery. Hrabal's stepfather was the manager of this brewery, and so this is where Hrabal grew up as a young boy. His early imagination was formed wandering amongst its beer vats, and he paid tribute to this brewery childhood in his books. One of those books I've already mentioned, written in 1973, The Little Town Where Time Stood Still. Hrabal also wrote another book entitled Cutting It Short, which is called Pośliziny in the original Czech. Pośliziny pays tribute to the character of his mother, who is depicted as youthful, energetic, and free, and the book was adapted into a film in the 1980s, which brought further fame to the little town that he loved. Nowadays, the Nymburk Brewery has named their main brand of beer as Poślizínskie Piwo in recognition of this heritage. The brewery has a small hut beside the car park with a hatch from which you can buy bottles of beer, so we decided to grab ourselves a few bottles of the Poślizínskie Piwo as our third stop. Amongst the types on offer, there is Pepinowa Desítka, which is unsurprisingly named after Uncle Pepin, and today I decided to go for a Francinów Leżak, a lager which takes its name from Francine, Hrabal's dad. The River Laber, also known in German as the Elbe, begins in the Kärkenoische Mountains in the north of Bohemia. It then winds its way across the northern plains of Germany, eventually draining out into the North Sea. The Laber also runs through the centre of Nymburk, and its riverside promenades offer an ideal location to be sitting out and enjoying a drink, especially on a sunny day like this. However, we are now finished exploring the town centre, and we are heading to another village not far from here. So now we've arrived in the village of Krsko, about 10 kilometers outside of Nymburk. Krsko is in a forest which once belonged to a local prince, but it is now where many people have their own cottage homes. Hrabal's name is synonymous with Kersko because this is also where he had his cottage. These cottages, usually known as chata to the Czech people, were a common part of life during the communist era. Hrabal had another home in the suburbs of Prague, but he also loved coming up to his cottage at weekends, and this building here is where many of his most famous books were written during the 70s and 80s. As well as coming here to write his fiction, Hrabal was renowned for adopting the stray cats in Kersko. Hrabal adored cats, and soon his cat colony expanded until he was caring for 15 of them. This obsessive cat caring was a source of pleasure for him, but it also derailed his writing and almost ruined his life. Here we can see some images of them coming to greet him. They used to wait for him on the road while he was walking up from the bus stop. For the last few years, it has not been possible to enter Hrabal's chata, as it has been closed to the public. However, in the next months, they are planning to reopen it with an exhibition about his life on the top floor. Timed to coincide with his 110th anniversary, it is yet another reason to visit Kersko if you're interested in him. The streets of Kersko are in fact laid out to resemble the street plan of New York, hence we're on this long avenue. For those of you who enjoy watching Czech cinema, you might recognize this street from the film The Snowdrop Festival, especially for a scene in which three hunters chase a wild boar past a supermarket on this street. This film was adapted from a collection of stories which Hrabal had written about his friends in Kersko. And the adaptation was carried out by the director Jiří Menzel, who often worked closely with Hrabal on many of his films. This film worked its way into the hearts of the Czech people, and it gave a certain immortality to this forest community. Added to which, as well as giving an immortality to the village, it also immortalized a particular pub on this street. This is our final stop on the pub crawl today, one of the pubs in Kersko, which is called the Hyenka. It is one of two pubs in this village, the other being U Pramena, where Hrabal also used to go, but the Hyenka has now become especially famous because they film scenes from the Snowdrop Festival here. The Snowdrop Festival culminates in a feast at the Hyenka, where the men in the village eat the boar, which they have shot, and the two hunting communities from Kersko and the neighbouring village try to overcome their differences for at least one evening. The main bone of contention between the two hunting societies is how the food is going to be prepared. The group from Kersko want their boar with rosehip sauce, while the group from the other village want their boar prepared with cabbage. Nowadays, if you choose to order some boar at the Hyenka, then you can resolve these differences by ordering the Talíř Hyenka, in which you can try the best of both worlds, one half with rosehip sauce, the other half with cabbage. Inside the pub though, we are now at the end of our pilgrimage, and we can celebrate with our 4th pint of the day, or perhaps our 5th, or our 6th. I'm not planning to try to keep track now. Either way, happy birthday to the great Bohumil Hrabal. Have a scene about how I put my special Hrabal socks on.
Oh, wow.
See? Beard on the outside, and then underneath
Oh, wow.
a cat.